Hello and happy whatever today, Thursday. Welcome to another episode. My name is Henry, and I was going to say welcome to the Teachers Lounge, where we talk all things teaching and all in support of teachers. But two episodes in, and I was looking for Teachers Lounge, and I found so many other channels. I did not see that the Teachers Lounge, the name was already taken because it's a great name. So I am changing this into Chalkboard Chats. So welcome to another episode of Chalkboard Chats, where we talk everything teaching and all in support of teachers. Today I want to discuss with you a concept that I saw somebody else who came up with it, and it is the invisible workload. And as soon as I saw the name, I was like, ah, that's the word that I've been looking for. The invisible workload for teachers. Why? I've been trying to explain this to people, and I've really struggled with this. Why is it sometimes such a difficult job? You would say that teaching, working X amount of time, the only thing that is exhausting is the time spent in the classroom because of all the students that are running around, especially if you're teaching young kids. That is exhausting. But I realized that that is not the most exhausting thing by far. That is actually something that can be energizing. I say can because it's not always energizing, but I have looked into what my week is like and why sometimes I am just so exhausted, so tired of teaching and having this job, and sometimes I just want to give it up. And I came up with, well, I made a whole list and I was like, but those are not invisible. I've decided on two kind of surprising things that make the job so heavy sometimes. But this is just like scratching the surface. So if after watching this, you're like, listen, there are so many, please put them in the comments below. I would love to hear about what factors make your job so difficult. So here are mine. Number one is the emotional investment of every student. So when you're teaching a class, I often get the idea that only the teacher sees every person as a full-on human. And I sometimes get the impression that, backup staff, backup, back office staff, admin, all the people around us don't feel that weight as much as we do. They see it as like a list of names, or maybe even like contact numbers and contact details of the parents. And I have found that every time I am in class and the more time I spend individually talking to each student, especially around test time, I feel this burden of this emotional connection that we have. Because as a teacher, you cannot help but want the student to do good. You want them to succeed. You want them to grow and like blossom and bloom and all the things. And when you have an emotional connection to somebody who is not thriving, who is struggling, who is maybe being bullied or being excluded, or is, in some other ways not thriving in your classroom, it weighs upon you. It is so heavy. It's so difficult. And it like pulls your heartstring a little bit. And I'm like, buddy. But to have that with 20 kids, and that is just one class. Now, I'm lucky. I don't have that many classes. But I found that it is draining when you have so much emotional investment in all of these different lives, and you have such a big role in it for them too. That I found very surprising, that those conversations, those aspects of teaching sometimes make it just so difficult and so hard. So that was number one. And then number two for me is the biggest burden. And I struggle with this quite a lot is that as a teacher, you're often asked to compromise on your own values. And there is this fine line between doing what is right and doing what you believe in and just not getting fired. So and it's and that's the thing, the walking the fine line and sometimes being asked to compromise on your own values is hard. And I'll give you an example. I had to compromise with management a couple of months ago, I say a year ago, when I was convinced that two of my students were in a level in my classes that were too easy for them. So they were at the time 5 years old, and they were in a level that was more suitable for 4 year olds, but also for 5 year olds who barely had the English language around them. And I think these two students, for some reason, are just around English so much. Now, both of these students were also able to write. And not only write, I could dictate words to them. So I was convinced that the best thing for the students, because I always think that that's the teacher's job, was to do another placement test and to see if we can move them up. And I asked management, I said, hey, what do we do in this situation? And they were like, oh, send an email. So I did. Nothing happened. 2 months later, I was like, hey, what about these two students? I think they should move up. And then I had the conversation with management, and they said that because these students were 5 years old, they couldn't move up. Regardless of what their capabilities were, they were not even going to test them. They were like, no, they're not old enough. And well, that was frustrating, but okay, fine. Rules are rules. I guess we have to follow them. So when they turned 6, both of them, I sent another email. I said, hey, guess what? They're 6 years old right now. They can move up. But by then, I didn't have the best relationship with management, and they refused to look into the case. They refused to retest the student. They just basically said no to whatever I was suggesting about these students. And I tried after that 2 more times, and then at some point I just gave up. I was like, well, there's no point. They're not going anywhere. Um, but then it was really difficult to have this conversation with the parents when the students graduated from my class. And they were like, yeah, but they found it so easy. They never complained that it was boring for them. I tried to give them interesting things. And I also I also made sure that they could help other students, which they loved. They loved showing off how good they were. Um, but to have that conversation with the parents and being honest and tell them that I knew it was too easy and that I wanted to move them up and that it was suggested and never acted upon was hard. That was really challenging because it feels as if when you're teaching that you teach what you feel right about. And when you do things that you don't feel right about, all of a sudden you're like, it feels wrong to be in that position. So that was one part of it. And then a bit of a lighter version of this. When you compromise on your values, where I think, teaching is or education is an absolute privilege to be and the teacher and the student. Um, but then that we sometimes wait, rewind. So it's an absolute privilege. And I think that every time spent with a student and a teacher in the classroom is precious, and we should focus on things that are important. Now, English language, we have to teach phonics. And in this lesson, I had to really compromise on the syllabus because there were some things that I did not agree on. At some point, I was teaching 5 year olds the difference between two sounds that are way too similar and nobody hears the difference, including me. Now, I don't remember what the sounds were, but it was the double, I think it was the double O. And I remember one word was bedroom. I think the difference between room and book. And we were doing the activity, and I was like, why do we spend this time? Why is this important? Why is this something that we're doing? And I find it sometimes challenging that we teach things and we look at the syllabus, and I'm like, I don't really agree that this should be taught right now, but I have to teach it anyway. Um, and it feels weird. It feels inauthentic. It feels strange to not completely be in your truth when you're teaching. You'd be like, I'm teaching this, but I don't agree. I don't think you should remember this. I don't think you should bend over backwards to try to remember this difference because nobody can hear it anyway. So yeah, that was the compromising the values and the emotional investment that you have with each student. Those are my top two invisible burdens that I take on with me. And I've now gotten very good at separating me from that burden, just to like kind of hook them with my thumb up, and I put it down for the time being. Um, Please let me know what your thoughts on this are. If you're a teacher and you are experiencing this invisible workload, please put them in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.